Good afternoon, everybody. This is About the Labor Live. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of purplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com, and host of Morning Joe's, the leading Minnesota Vikings podcast that is streamed live in the morning. It's a pretty big crowd, but a lot of competition there. I wanted to do something a little bit different today and really focus topic by topic. Of course, if you're new to the show or you're one of the faithful that have been here for nearly every episode, you can comment or ask questions regardless of what social media platform that you're on. And I'll get to those when I can, but I really wanted to focus on just a couple quick topics before getting to the main crux of the show, which is why I think the Vikings are going to upset the 49ers in San Francisco. But again, this is a audience participation show, so I definitely want you guys to ask questions or make comments. I do have a couple special guests coming up on Morning Joe's that should make an appearance also on this show. Former Vikings head coach Mike Tice will be on Morning Joe's next Tuesday morning, and then hopefully on this show sometime after that to promote his new podcast. If you look up on Twitter or Google Mike Tice and podcast, you'll find it. Beyond, Romero Santos LDN says, hey, right back at you. Beyond that, Vikings great Tommy Kramer will also be on Morning Joe's the week after that and on this show, as well as Carl Lee, a Vikings great former cornerback. I'm also working on getting Nick Swartzen on the show. I was hoping to get him on this week, but he blew his voice out celebrating the Saints win, and he needs his voice to make money. I told him to get into prop comedy. Didn't go over well. I wanted to react really quickly. Oh, we have a troll. Romero is talking about the Vikings as in the nomadic Scandinavians in the history books. We're talking about football. So they both raped and pillaged. One was just real people. The other ones were the souls and hearts and dreams of their fan base. And we'll leave it at that. I saw an article from Judd Zulgad that I wanted to respond to because I feel like even though he's probably not aware of my article, even though it kind of went viral, I'm lumped into the group of people who were calling for Zimmer's head at the end of this season. He essentially says what a fool's errand that was, and he breaks it down into two sort of questions, one that he doesn't actually get into answering, but that was that essentially because of the Saints game that negates, I guess, everything that Zimmer has done this season. The first question he asks is, well, where the heck was that all season? And I think if you're asking that question, then it's very valid to also say, okay, well, maybe his seat is getting warm, because if he had a spectacular game, a mind-blowing game plan against the Saints, and there were no other real great examples of that this season in this defense. The defense seemed past its prime up until that game. That arguably was one of the best games this Vikings defense has ever had under Zimmer, or really in my lifetime. And so, of course, people are going to ask that question if there's an outlier of something that's good is rare. And it's so good that you ask, where was that outside of it? That implies that things weren't going that great. So I don't think it's that strange to have raised that question. I also think that Zimmer is a head coach, not a defensive coordinator, so to solely focus on the defense when he's also, in charge of the entire team, special teams, offense, and seemingly doesn't really know what the offensive game plan is, at least from the comments that he made after Monday Night Football. Of course, people are going to do that. I mean, on paper, does it seem strange? Yeah, they're 10-6. They made the playoffs, but that's way below the expectations and below the investment that the Wolves have made in this team. That's actually something I want to talk to Coach Tice about, his experience coaching under Red McCombs, and if he ever felt like they were squandering their window of opportunity because McCombs essentially wanted to torpedo the team so the fan base would get depressed enough to allow him to move it to San Antonio or Los Angeles. Thankfully, The Vikings drafted a guy named Randy Moss who reinvigorated the fan base, sold out every game since, and the rest is history. But I just wanted to touch on that Zolgad article because he makes it seem like it's so preposterous that it's hacky or stupid that people would ask that question, and I completely understand. I'm not doing the same thing to him. I understand why he may disagree, but to act as if it just was made out of whole cloth for reasons of clicks or ignorance, I don't think is fair, especially, again, if you go to his article, which is on Bleacher Report, he doesn't really answer the first question in that article, which is, where was it all season? Oh, Romero is not trolling. He actually thought this was a legitimate Vikings show. I can see why. I mean, I have the really thick braided facial hair of my ancestors. That's also red for some reason. Anyway, I wanted to get more into my thoughts on the 49ers game and why I'm confident in the Vikings winning this game. Calvin75 just said, conspiracy theory, they have learned from falling off in the playoffs in the past that they finally figured out that they need a secondary game plan for the playoffs from the regular season. Are you asking whether or not they need like a plan B if plan A doesn't work? Yes. And I'm sure that's why they work 100 hours a week. The thing, I mean, yes, and that's their job, and I'm sure they have every contingency for, well, I shouldn't say that based on what I just said about Zimmer. It seems like if their game plan hasn't worked, especially offensively, they maybe go up tempo, but outside of that, we haven't seen a lot of change. Monday Night Football, there wasn't a lot of change from the first half to the second half. I do think that they've learned from those mistakes, though. I really do, and I think that they have seen the benefits of playing towards your strengths as opposed to trying to trick the other team by doing something that they may not expect, even if that thing that they may not expect is something that you know your team is bad at. In the shotgun spread stuff, Cousins, there's ample amount of data to show that that's not what you want to do with Cousins or this offense. You want to run the ball, and you want to run the play action off of that. Luckily, that's something that you can do against the 49ers. Their rush defense is 22nd in the league in regards to yards per attempt. You can run off tackle. You can run to the right side. Hopefully you can pick up some yards on the left side. That doesn't work that great, but are amazing holes. And I think that, honestly, if you go into this game and you do what the Seahawks did to the Vikings, which is pick up 6, 7, 8 yards on first down by running the ball, you're going to demoralize the defense, you're going to tire them out, and you're going to get the crowd out of it. That same thing extends to the play-action rollouts and bootlegs. You want to keep Cousins out of the pocket as much as possible. You don't want Bosa or Ford to do what Zadarius Smith did in Monday Night Football. You have Cousins running around. You're going to get those big guys running after him. That's going to tire them out. I'd be all for coming out tempo, even though you would think that that's something Zimmer tries to not do. And by Zimmer, I mean Stefanski and Kubiak. I think they really want to slow the game down, especially on the road. Make it methodical and again, get the crowd out of it. But if you come out in an up-tempo against this team, it's something they may not expect because they play a lot like the Vikings. They play old school football. It's smash mouth football. And I think that's something where you can deviate and do something they may not expect while also focusing on your strengths. You don't have to necessarily do double or triple reverses. You can just change the tempo, and that has a dramatic effect, as we saw in the Broncos game. But as long as they do more of the same, again, I'm very confident you can run against these guys. You can negate their pass rush and their front seven a little bit by getting Cousins out of the pocket. If they're in man and you want to run some screens, maybe have Cousins roll out and actually run for yardage, which is something he doesn't do very often. Get them to get back to zone, and then you can dump the ball off to Dalvin Cook. But there's a few reasons specifically why I am confident in this game, and I'll look at your guys' comments in a second. One of the main ones was I was reading an article on the Sacramento Bee that was breaking down the strengths and weaknesses against the Vikings. And if I can read this section to you guys, I think it's very interesting. Well, I'll paraphrase it. Essentially, the Vikings have played a lot of good tight ends this season. And obviously George Kittle is the cream of the crop. He's all pro. He's the best tight end in the entire NFL. And a lot of people are worried about that. They're worried about his ability to exploit the zone. Do you put a spy on him? If so, who? I'll get into some silver linings there in a second. But this paragraph from the Sacramento Bee, I think, is interesting. The Vikings defense will face its biggest test Saturday going up against 49ers all-pro tight end George Kittle. But if any team can contain Kittle, it might be the Vikings, who will likely use a variety of players to cover him. Minnesota's defense-adjusted value over average against tight ends ranks at 45.9%, which leads the NFL. Again, which leads the NFL. The 49ers rank second at 32.4. The Vikings have faced tight ends such as Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, Darren Waller, Austin Hooper, Evan Ingram, Hunter Henry, and Jacob Hollister this season. And guess how many touchdowns they gave up from that entire group? 0. That's not to say that we can disregard how important Kittle will be to this game plan, but he's the focal point of the offense in the passing game, obviously. He's a security blanket for Garoppolo. You know, there's been a lot of talk about the wide receivers in San Francisco. Up until even recently, you know, they've had a kind of a wide receiver by committee system until they traded for Emmanuel Sanders. Then they've really relied on 3 guys, Deebo Samuel being another who's had some breakout games. He's kind of the X factor. He's the down the field guy. He's the speedster. But they've had issues at the wide receiver position, and it's something that has been written about ad nauseum, especially in San Francisco sports media. And so while they, still are, according to like just overall yards per game, the 4th best offense in the NFL, they are the 13th in passing. And I think the Vikings, outside of, Samuel getting open down the field, have a really good shot. And I know a lot of people are worried about what's going on in the secondary. You have Mackenzie Alexander undergoing arthroscopic surgery. He'll be out for a couple weeks minimum. Mike Hughes is done on IR. I do believe that situation is going to end up being a silver lining. I really like the combination of Curse and Sendejo in the nickel position. I think Sendejo is extremely physical to the point of fines and flags, but that's what you need going up against Kittle, especially as we saw with Curse playing safety at the end. I think of the Chargers game, he covered Fant on that 4th and goal, and he's just such a big guy that he can shut down tight ends. And what's neat about it is you can have them look like they're going to play in the nickel, but maybe Curse could be a hybrid linebacker. They both can obviously fall back to play safety. It just gives you a lot of really interesting options on defense. And when you look at what Zimmer did against the Saints and the tricks that he pulled out, again, they were wrinkles that were variations of what they've done. It wasn't an entirely new system, despite the fact that they moved the defensive ends inside. It wasn't extremely confusing for the secondary like it was in the Eagles game, where you had Harrison Smith running around like a chicken with his head cut off, with his arms up like I don't know what's going on. There were just too many variables for them to think about. It was almost like, I think how they limited Breeze, which I'll get to in a second, you add just a 1 split second of new information or new thought processes to these players, then they're not playing, they're thinking, and then it's over. And so I'm very confident in their ability to stop Kittle, or at least limit the damage there. I mean, if they were able to hold a guy like Michael Thomas, who had a historical season, to 70 yards, I think they'll do okay against Kittle. Different position, obviously, but I just mean in terms of execution. Another point that I think is at least worth exploring is, if Zimmer and company were able to get Breeze to play the worst game that he's played in this season in a while, to shut down that high-flying offense, you're going up against a guy in Jimmy Garoppolo who, despite his age, has limited experience, who isn't battle-tested, who has had bad games. again, if you can confuse Breeze, there's no reason why you can't confuse Garoppolo. And I wanted to look at, according to the 49ers media, some of the strengths and weaknesses of a Garoppolo's game for you guys to chew on. The strengths are he has intermediate accuracy over the middle. That helps when you have a tight end like Kittle. The second one is accuracy, throwing quick passes, especially to the left. That's a little scary, considering that's been an issue that the Vikings have had to deal with, quick passes and getting pressure but not sacks. He has accuracy when rolling out. That's something that is a little scary too, because the Vikings have struggled against mobile quarterbacks who extend plays. And he's good at off-platform throws. And so I'll just read what they say. When Garoppolo faces pressure in the pocket, he doesn't have to set his feet to throw an accurate pass, essentially. He can move and make snap throws from many different arm angles and throwing platforms. The weaknesses, though, are patience, poise, and discipline when setting up to throw. So that kind of negates the final strength. That kind of ties into the fifth one, which is judgment. I think you guys can see where I'm going with this, but I think that especially with Anthony Harris playing the way that he is and Zimmer disguising coverages and the ability to disguise coverages because you have hybrid players on the field in Sendejo and Curse, Garoppolo very well could have multiple interceptions. And I think if whoever wins the turnover battle is going to win this game because it's going to be close outside of a meltdown from Garoppolo, which on paper I'm somehow figuring out. And so I think that's incredibly important. I mean, if they were, again, able to do what they did to Breeze, Garoppolo shouldn't be an issue outside of his mobility. His second weakness is progressions and locating the second receiver. That's huge. So essentially, he has an inability to locate the second receiver on the field, and that lends itself also to turnovers because you can watch his eyes and essentially know that he is if he's looking at that guy, that's where the ball's going, or he's going to dump it off or just throw it away. I think that's something that should make every single one of you extremely excited. Despite my demeanor right now, it's making me very excited. I'm getting more and more confident as the show goes on. The third is intermediate accuracy outside the numbers. That's something that, again, you're throwing to Kittle, then you're throwing to a hodgepodge of guys, especially earlier in the season before Emmanuel Sanders. That makes sense. They don't have the best talent there. I mean, if you're looking at the Vikings and what they can do, yeah. Deep accuracy. So that helps for Xavier Rhodes because, as I said on Morning Joe's yesterday, and I was just on the scoop on KLGR radio today, we're basically gonna have to get used to Xavier Rhodes giving up a deep ball touchdown every week, and then the defense essentially shutting teams down outside of that. And so, just going through those things, I think that it's not hard to see why the Vikings are a better matchup than some people say they are, despite, even like charts like this one, where you can see, the Niners in total offense, passing offense, rushing offense, total defense, passing defense, rushing defense, beat the Vikings in every category outside of the rush defense. The Vikings are 13th and the 49ers are 17th, and that's just total yards per game. Yeah, I mean, I just think that as long as, again, they play their game, they don't get too cute, they get Cousins out of the pocket, they have a really good chance to win this game. I would argue the Saints were a tougher team to beat. The Saints had a more lethal offense, a quick strike offense. Garoppolo struggles down the field, locating a second receiver. All of that doesn't lend itself to quick strike capabilities. So if the Vikings can get up by a score too early and force the 49ers to be one-dimensional, to get away from their ground game, and to lean on Garoppolo and his off-platform throws, and especially if you're able to limit the damage from Kittle, I think that defensively things are looking really good. On the other side of the ball, again, Dalvin Cook, if he can do, injured or not, second half play or not, if he was able to nearly get 100 yards rushing, get 130 some yards total offense against the Saints, who are amazing against the run, not just through sheer will, but because of the play of the offensive line, namely the offensive line from Bradbury over to O'Neal. Ooh, setting up. Ooh, you could set up a lot of play action, a lot of. If you're gonna do a cute gimmicky play, make it a flea flicker, please. Don't give it to Diggs to throw. And so, I mean, it makes you excited to think. I saw an article from somebody in the gambling industry talking about the headline, I think, was the Vikings aren't your typical 6th seed. And his essential point, let's see if I still have it pulled up. His point was that the Vikings are extremely talented at the skill positions, which apparently people in the national media are forgetting. I mean, there's no team in the league position by position on offense that has as much talent left in this playoff season that like the Vikings do. I mean, I don't need to tell you what they're doing. I don't need to tell you whose jersey I'm wearing. You guys know what I mean. And it's really going to be a pick your poison situation. And going back to your question, the longest answer ever, I'm sure they have a plan B. If they game plan to take Diggs or Thielen out, maybe they'll go to the tight ends more. I do want to see a big game from some of the younger guys, from Beastie Johnson himself, from Irv Smith Jr., more heavy personnel stuff, more 3 tight end stuff, assuming Conklin is okay. But I just am encouraged by what I saw, by the ice water running through Cousins' veins. I think he feels extremely comfortable. One of the other things that essentially the guy in the gambling industry said, that the Vikings are really good against the spread, and they're really good when they're underdogs. And I could see that. I think they're 7.5-point underdogs in this game. No one's giving them a chance. Everyone's talking about 49ers versus Aaron Rodgers, or 49ers versus Russell Wilson, a rematch of the Seahawks 49ers. Good. Underestimate this team. I think they have a tremendous amount of experience. This defense has played together for a really long time by football standards. And, when you look at also the I don't know. I just don't. I'm surprised by the lack of shine. And again, I'll take it any day of the week, because nobody wants to play this Vikings team. Looking at some of your stuff, yeah, I think Calvin said the advantage to Harris. Yeah, I mean, Harris, man, him and Klein, I think, have been the MVPs thus far, or at least the MVPs of the guys that no one ever talks about. Tang says that he gives Rhodes shit when he plays like shit, but he had a pretty solid game overall. I agree with you. Outside of that one blown play, he played well, and he seemed injured, but that's kind of his MO. He stepped up. He's big. He's physical. Again, we might have to take one bad play. He's not as quick as he used to be. Double moves seem to murder him, but he still, again, he did have a good game. Oh yeah, Tank says talent is amazing, but it's not the end all be all. Talent can't overcome terrible coaching, i.e. the Cowboys. I agree with you. I mean, I think the Cowboys have other issues. I don't think they're a very cohesive unit. I think there's a lot of divas on that team, and I am elated that Mike McCarthy went there, because he's not going to be able to fix that. He had the best quarterback, perhaps talent-wise, in the history of the NFL, and he won a Super Bowl, and then what? Nothing. Granted, since 2014, he hasn't been that guy in Aaron Rodgers, but nobody benefited from one of the double-edged swords of having a really good quarterback is that you can end up with a mediocre coach that hangs around forever because of that play. I mean, Ted Thompson, especially more so than Mike McCarthy, should be reviled in Green Bay. I mean, to for whatever reason not want to go after free agents in the 21st century when you're growing a football team is insanity. I don't know why that wasn't a bigger issue for Packers fans. I would have, if I was writing for the Packers, man, that would be an everyday thing. My don't get too cute movement would be like hashtag sign a free agent, question mark, / what are you doing? This isn't 1942, you weird cheese-eating bastard. Tank says a good script by the coaches would be able to tell by the first quarter. I think, yes, like I said in the pregame last week, we're going to know on the first drive what's going on with this Vikings team. And then again, going back to that Zolgad article, that's an indictment on the coaches in a way. I mean, if you know that quickly as guys, especially me, I'm not an X's and O's guys. I just see colors and movement like a T-Rex. I don't know what the hell's going on. To essentially say, well, we'll know if we're going to get blown out just seeing a few of the plays. I mean, that just tells you the weird season this Vikings team has had. And yesterday I brought this up, but somebody responded to my Cousins Final Mountain article and said Cousins is mediocre, get over it. And there's one thing you can't say about Cousins or this Vikings team this season is that they're mediocre, or he's mediocre. He's an MVP or Spurgeon win. You know what I mean? Like, there's such a difference between his good games and his bad games, and there wasn't a ton of mediocrity in between. The Vikings, same thing. And that's just, you have to identify what the variables are that lead to those outcomes and then mitigate the bad ones. And I think that it took a really long time for them to do that, but that's where they're at now. That having been said, they could really be outthinking themselves this week. I think one of the benefits, one of the things that San Francisco media talked about as a weakness for this Vikings team was that they might be tired because they're the only team on a short week. The emotional draining aspect of the win that they had. And if you guys read any of the post-game stuff on Monday or Sunday night, a lot of the veterans in the locker room didn't even need Zimmer to do this, but they were like, all right, everyone calm down. We had our little viral moment with Cousins, but we have a game in a couple days. And I think they learned from the Minneapolis Miracle that you have to stay focused and stay professional. I still think that game was a game planning issue, but they were emotionally drained as well. And so I actually think it's a benefit that there's only a short week for them because, as we've talked about before, when we've seen some of the too cute stuff, it seems to come after like a Thursday night game, then they have 10 days off or a bye or something where they maybe had the right game plan 2 days before the game, but then they're like, man, we've got a couple days left and we're all set. Let's add some wrinkles, and let's add some wrinkles to those wrinkles. And then the offense looks nothing like it otherwise would have. So I'll take the short week because I want the game plan to be as similar to what they did in Nolans as possible. I mean, not you know what I mean. Same concepts, same formations, same personnel packages, but some wrinkles to those. Tang says Cousins is a low-tier elite quarterback that needs a good supporting cast around him to succeed. That's all he is and ever will be until he pulls a Rich Gannon. Yes. And I said that. I was the first guy in Vikings media to write an article, and I think the headline was, "I'll say it, the Vikings need to go all in on Cousins." And I said exactly that. He can be an elite quarterback statistically in the right system with the right guys around him. He is a elite game manager in this offense, and that sounds like a really big oxymoron because game managers aren't elite, they're mediocre by definition. But if he can just do what he does, be efficient, distribute the ball to this talent, they'll make plays. That's not to say that he doesn't also contribute majorly. That throw to Cousins was gorgeous, but he hasn't shown really in his career outside of this season the ability to I don't want to say elevate the guys around him because he has. Him and Thielen broke records to start the season last year. But I think he was smart to not take more money to go to New York because he would have been the first piece out of 11, and especially with the New York media and the expectations with that contract, they were years away from doing anything substantial, as we've seen. So it made more sense to come here where he knows, all right, all I have to do is play my game, and I'm going to be able to, theoretically, I mean, he was 90 or like 80-some yards away from 5,000 yards passing in 2016. With receivers like Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon, then both of them left because it's Washington and they're terrible at running franchises outside of hockey. And then his numbers weren't as good. But I think that's a great example if you look at 2016 and what he did. But there was no run game. So I always said if Cousins puts up 5,000 yards, that means bad things for the run game, because this is a much more balanced offense in regards to everything, especially not so much last year, but talent and outcome and play calling. RN made it with the obligatory skull. What's up, man? Tang says people are talking about Reef. I don't know. About a month ago, we were talking about mock draft stuff internally with the writers, and at the time, I wanted them to use their first-round pick on a 3-tech defensive tackle. But now, yeah, I think they have to go left tackle. I do not want them to move Brian O'Neill, for the love of God. Don't do it. He's playing masterfully at the right side, and just don't TJ Clemmings him and move. I mean, that's not a really great example, but don't move him. Build around it. That right side is set for a while. I forget how old Klein is. I don't think he's that old. I think he's like 28 or 29. But you have everything that you need. If Elflein can get better, or if you put Samia over there and you can get a hit on a first-round guy. Granted, it's going to be late in the first round, so you might not have your pick of the litter. But, get somebody in there. You don't have to pay Reeves' contract anymore. I mean, that's... Maybe you have him behind Reef for a while. I'm a little wary, unless it's a really good pick, or they trade up, or even find another free agent. I don't care. This Reef is breaking down, and he's not had a great year. And I think that's impacted Elflein a little bit, but I think that's kind of a symbiotic situation. It's kind of a death spiral. One plays bad, and it hurts the other, and it just goes down and down and down. Anyway, you guys, what do you guys think? RN and Ting. Give me your God's honest opinion as of right now, and you can change this. I won't hold it against you. Score prediction for the Vikings. I got mine. I'm not deviating from it. I said, and don't let this impact what you're going to say. I said 21-18 Vikings. Maybe 19. No, it's 21-19. RN says, I think F San Francisco. How about that? That works. I'd wrap it up, though. There's a lot of hepatitis on those streets, if I read presidential tweets correctly. 7 years ago. RN says 24-18. Pretty close to my score. I think Oberle had something similar to that. Who knows? It could end up being a shootout. I don't think it will be. I don't think either of these teams are really built that way. But again, I could see... Ooh, I can picture it. I could see Garoppolo with a few turnovers. Again, I hate to be repetitive, but if Zimmer can confuse Breeze, he can confuse anybody. And I prefer Curse and Sendejo over Mackenzie Alexander and Mike Hughes, to be completely honest with you. I'm also happy that Sherrills is back. He didn't do much against the Saints, but he's probably a little bit rusty. I think he can make some hay against the 49ers as well. He just provides an X factor that the Vikings didn't have from Hughes, turning something from nothing. Tang, what's your score prediction, man? You got everyone on pins and needles. Tang says he's not sold on our pass rush against the 49ers. I don't know, man. If Danielle Hunter could do what he did against an all-pro offensive tackle in the Saints, he can probably do it against a second-year guy in San Francisco. It depends on where they line them up, obviously. I'm sure they won't do the same thing as they did last week. The thing about the pass rush is with a guy like Garoppolo is just making sure that he doesn't step up in pocket or extended plays are rolling around. Maybe you put a buy on him situationally. I don't know. That's the one thing that scares me, especially in seeing what Taysom Hill did against the Vikings defense. I think a lot of that was just bad tackling, bad form, not using your arms. But that was kind of a blessing in disguise because it gave them that little bit of, okay, this is what we need to shore up against a guy like Garoppolo, who isn't like Taysom Hill. I'm not saying that specifically, but the mobility, some of the size, so on and so forth. Tank says 24-20 or 23-20. We should start doing this each week. Let's do this for the pregame. Final score predictions. Whoever's the closest wins like a Vikings gnome. I think I have one back here. Yeah, look at that guy. He's a complete creep. Level 3 sex offender. Who knows? I have seen some scientific studies that say teams that go out to the West Coast have a statistically significant drop-off in their performance because of those, what are they called, circadian rhythms and minor jet lag. I don't think that'll be that big of a deal for a game that, starts at 3:30 their time, or is that our time? No, it is our time. So, I mean, it's just like a noon game, or a regular 3:30 game. It's not like it's 7:30 their time, thus they're playing at midnight from what they're used to biologically. But I'll leave it at that. I mean, hopefully I say this every time, but I'm trying to find the right time to do this where people are kind of at the point in their workday where they're done working, but there's still time left on the clock, so they're running it out by watching me ramble in my basement. Oh, okay. And Tang meant pass blocking against the pass rush. I said this on the scoop today, but I think if you get Cousins out of the pocket, you mitigate a lot of that. And then you tire out those guys because they're big and they're chasing Cousins all over the place. Up tempo, roll Cousins out, get those guys running. Bingo bango, NFC Championship, Vikings Packers, biggest game of all time. Ooh, wouldn't that be something? All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks again for checking in, RN and Tang. You're my besties.